The stagecoach door swung open before the wheels had fully stopped, and the first thing Clara Bell heard was someone whisper, "That's the mail order bride?"
She don't look
Another
like
voice
much.
answered without lowering itself enough to hide the contempt. "She doesn't even smile." Clara stepped carefully onto the frozen ground, her heavy traveling skirt brushing against fresh snow. She was 28, broad-shouldered and full-figured from years of honest work rather than comfort, carrying one leather satchel and a wooden box fitted with carefully wrapped glass bottles. She looked across the small Wyoming town, searching for the man who had written 3 careful letters promising partnership instead of romance. No one stepped forward. Only the station master removed his hat. "You're too late," he said quietly. The words struck harder than the wind. "He passed 3 days ago. Fever." Silence settled over the depot. The arrangement that had carried Clara nearly 1,500 miles had vanished before she ever touched this town. If you believe every person deserves a place to belong, stay with this story until the end. A few curious townsfolk drifted closer. "She ought to turn around." Poor woman. "She'll only become the county's burden." Clara lowered her eyes, not in shame but to keep herself steady. She had sold nearly everything she owned for this journey. There was no money for another ticket east. The station master shifted awkwardly. "There is one possibility." He nodded toward a rider approaching through the snow. The horse moved with practiced confidence, its rider sitting straight despite the bitter wind. Sheriff Elias Mercer dismounted without wasting a motion. He looked to be around 40, his weathered coat dusted white, his expression calm enough to hide whatever he thought. "You're Miss Bell?" She nodded. He studied the unopened trunk, the medicine chest, and the tired determination in her face. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said simply. "Even if you never truly met the man." His honesty surprised her. "So am I." "The boarding house is full. Ranches are cutting hands for winter." He paused before adding, "I'll see what can be arranged." One of the men watching laughed. "You arranging brides now, Sheriff?" Elias ignored him. Clara noticed that. It was a small kindness, but one offered without making a spectacle of it. As they walked toward town, she asked softly, "Was he a good man?" "The fellow you came to marry?" "Yes." Elias kept his eyes ahead. "Everyone buried him." It wasn't the answer she expected. "Only good people fill a church on 3 days' notice." She carried those words with her. They reached the boarding house only to find another problem waiting. Mrs. Hadley folded her apron. "I've no room." "You have the attic," Elias replied. "I have paying railroad man." The woman looked Clara over, lingering just long enough to make her meaning clear. "A mail-order bride without a husband earns nothing." Clara drew a slow breath. "I can pay." "With what?" Instead of answering, Clara opened her wooden box. Inside lay neatly labeled jars, dried herbs, clean bandages, needles, and carefully folded papers. "I was apprenticed to a veterinary doctor," she said. "I treat livestock, horses, cattle, sheep." Mrs. Hadley blinked. "So? So I work." Before anyone could answer, frantic shouting burst from the street. "Sheriff!" A ranch hand came running. "Burke's prize stallion's gone down." Elias was already moving. "What happened?" "Foaming. Won't stand. Fetch the town doctor. He's delivering a baby over Miller Creek." The young ranch hand looked ready to panic. Clara closed her medicine chest. "Take me." Every head turned. The ranch hand frowned. "You? If the horse is still breathing, don't waste time arguing." Something in her voice carried quiet certainty. Elias studied her only a second before lifting her medicine chest himself. "Show us." The stallion lay inside a warm stable, sides heaving, dark eyes rolling with pain. 3 men struggled to keep him from injuring himself. Owner Caleb Burke looked furious. "I didn't ask for some stranger woman." Clara ignored the insult. She knelt beside the animal, letting it smell her hand before touching its neck. "Stop pulling on him." Nobody moved. "I said stop." Even Burke hesitated. She examined the horse's gums, breathed near its mouth, then picked through scattered feed with careful fingers. Her face changed. "What did you mix into today's oats?" "The usual." "No, She held up several crushed black seeds. "This isn't usual." Burke frowned. "I've never seen those." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Because someone added them." The stable fell silent. She worked quickly, mixing warm water with powdered charcoal from her kit, coaxing the horse to swallow while directing the men with surprising authority. "You," she pointed toward Burke, "keep his head steady." "You," she nodded to another ranch hand, "walk him the moment he tries to stand." Elias watched without interfering. For the first time that day, Clara forgot everyone was judging her. There was only the animal fighting to live. Several endless minutes passed. Then the stallion coughed violently. His breathing slowed. One trembling leg pushed beneath him. Then another. He stood. A collective breath escaped the stable. Burke stared in disbelief. "You saved him." Clara wiped her hands on a cloth. "I kept him alive." She looked again at the scattered feed. "But if those seeds came from where I think they did, someone meant for this horse to die." The room went still. Elias slowly crouched beside the spilled oats, picked up one of the dark seeds, and his expression hardened in a way that made even Burke step back. Because the sheriff recognized exactly where those poisonous seeds could only have come from, and they had no business being anywhere near Burke's ranch. Elias rolled one of the black seeds between his gloved fingers without crushing it. Snow clung to the soles of his boots as he rose. "Don't touch the feed," he said. "No one throws any of it away." Burke frowned. "You know what that is?" "I know where it grows." His answer settled over the stable like another layer of winter frost. Clara washed the last traces of charcoal from her hands with water from a bucket. The stallion leaned weakly against her shoulder, no longer fighting the pain. She stroked his neck until his breathing steadied. "Will he live?" Burke asked, his anger replaced by worry. "If he rests through the night and drinks enough water, he has a fair chance." The rancher's broad face softened. "Then I owe you an apology. You owe your horse a safer feed room." Burke gave a surprised snort that almost sounded like a laugh. Outside, the wind had begun to rise. Elias handed the seed to his deputy, a young man named Owen. "Take this to my office. Lock it in the evidence box." Owen hesitated. "You think this was deliberate?" "I don't believe poisonous plants harvest themselves." As the deputy rode away, Elias turned toward Clara. "You noticed something 3 experienced ranch hands missed." She fastened the brass latch on her medicine chest. "I noticed what didn't belong." He nodded once, as though that answer told him far more than the others could hear. By the following morning, word had traveled through every street in town. The silent mail-order bride had saved Caleb Burke's prized stallion. People who had pitied her now watched with cautious curiosity. A few even tipped their hats. Others remained suspicious. "She got lucky. She reads books. That isn't ranch work. She'll be gone before spring." Clara heard every whisper without answering. Mrs. Hadley finally offered her the attic room. "Only for a week," she warned. "A week is generous," Clara replied. The room was small enough that she could touch both walls if she stretched out her arms. A narrow bed sat beneath the slanted roof, and cold air slipped through gaps in the boards. Yet after 3 nights on a stagecoach, it felt almost welcoming. She unpacked carefully. A worn Bible, 2 dresses, a sewing kit, a folded bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. She placed them inside the drawer without opening them. At the bottom of her satchel rested a leather notebook filled with careful handwriting, columns of figures, breeding records, grazing rotations, and sketches of pasture boundaries. Few people knew she had copied years of livestock journals while assisting the veterinary doctor. She had learned that healthy animals depended as much on careful records as good medicine. The notebook had been her true education. A knock interrupted her thoughts. When she opened the door, Sheriff Mercer stood outside holding a loaf of fresh bread. "The bakery made too much." She looked at the untouched loaf. "They sent you?" "No." He almost smiled. "I bought it." She accepted it with both hands. "Thank you." After a quiet moment, he asked, "Would you mind looking at another horse tomorrow?" Is it ill? No. His answer puzzled her. I'd still like your opinion. The next morning he led her beyond town to the sheriff's modest property. Unlike the larger ranches, it held only a small barn, 2 workhorses, several chickens, and a weathered house that had clearly been repaired more times than replaced. One mare limped slightly as she crossed the paddock. Clara crouched immediately. She favors the left foreleg. You saw that from here? She wants to hide it. The mare allowed Clara to lift her hoof. She scraped away packed mud until a tiny stone appeared beneath the frog. There, she eased it free. The horse shifted its weight almost instantly. Elias watched in silence. You didn't need a doctor, she said. I needed someone who notices. She looked up. You've been testing me. I've been deciding whether to trust my own judgment. And? He folded his arms. The town saw a stranger. I did too. What changed? You keep proving the stranger isn't the important part. The words lingered long after they returned to town. For the first time since arriving, Clara felt something inside her loosen, not belonging, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of being seen. That afternoon, trouble returned. A farmer named Ellis Harper stormed into the sheriff's office carrying a sack of shriveled wheat. My fields are dying, Elias examined the grain. Disease? Harper shook his head violently. They were healthy last week. Clara glanced into the sack. May I? The farmer hesitated before handing it over. She rubbed several stalks between her fingers. There are tiny cuts. What does that mean? Harper asked. These weren't damaged by weather. She searched deeper until another black seed fell into her palm. Her heartbeat slowed. The same plant. Elias looked sharply toward her. You're certain? I'd stake my reputation on it. Harper's face drained of color. You mean someone poisoned my fields? Not exactly, Clara murmured. She crouched beside the sack. These seeds spread aggressively if they're scattered before snowmelt. By spring, they'll choke young crops. So someone ruined my planting? She nodded, and Burke's horse found them in his feed. Elias's jaw tightened. Those aren't separate accidents. No. Someone is attacking livelihoods. Before anyone spoke again, Owen burst through the office door, breathing hard. Sheriff? What now? The county records office was broken into last night. What was taken? Nothing we can find. Clara frowned. If nothing was stolen, why break in? Owen swallowed. Because someone searched every cattle ledger in the building. Silence settled over the room. Clara slowly opened her leather notebook. Her fingers stopped on a page filled with neat columns copied years earlier from breeding registries and livestock sales. She looked up at Elias. What if they weren't looking for cattle? He met her eyes. What do you mean? What if they were looking for records that could disappear without anyone realizing why? Before Elias could answer, another voice came from the open doorway. Well? Every head turned. A tall gentleman in a tailored black coat stood brushing snow from his sleeves. His polished boots looked untouched by ranch mud, and a silver watch chain glinted across his vest. His gaze settled on Clara with unmistakable recognition. I had wondered where you vanished. The color left Clara's face. Elias noticed it immediately. You know this man? Clara's lips parted, but no words came. The stranger removed his hat with perfect manners. Allow me to introduce myself, he said smoothly. My name is Nathan Ashcombe. He smiled. And Miss Clara Bell once worked for my family. The room fell deathly quiet. Only Clara knew he had carefully chosen those last 4 words, because they weren't the truth, not even close. Nathan Ashcombe waited with the patient confidence of a man accustomed to controlling every room he entered. Clara did not return his gaze. Sheriff Elias Mercer noticed the change in her breathing before anyone else did. She had faced down an unruly stallion without flinching, yet now her hands tightened around the worn leather notebook until her knuckles turned white. You know him, Elias said quietly. Yes. Nathan smiled as though they were old acquaintances meeting after a pleasant journey. Miss Bell always was modest. That isn't my name anymore, Clara answered, finding her voice. No? It hasn't been for years. Nathan's smile thinned only slightly. Well then, Clara Bell it is. Elias stepped between them without fanfare, not blocking Clara completely, only making it clear she would answer for herself if she wished. What brings you to my office? He asked. Nathan reached into his coat and produced official-looking papers. I represent investors purchasing grazing contracts and breeding stock across 3 counties. I was informed a former employee of my family's estate had unexpectedly appeared here. You traveled this far for one woman? Elias asked. Nathan's eyes flickered. I traveled for business. Seeing Miss Bell was surprising. Clara finally looked straight at him. You're lying. The room went still. Nathan laughed softly. You always did dislike polite conversation. I dislike men who hide behind it. Elias accepted the folded papers and scanned them. They were legitimate contracts, signed and stamped. Nothing on them explained why Nathan cared about Clara. That's enough for today, the sheriff said. Nathan inclined his head. I'll be staying at the hotel. As he reached the door, he paused without turning around. You still have the notebook, don't you? The question struck Clara like a hammer. She said nothing. Nathan smiled to himself and walked out into the snow. Only after the door closed did Elias speak. What notebook? Clara looked down at the worn leather volume in her hands. This one. He waited. She took a long breath. My father worked as head livestock steward on a large breeding estate back east. He wasn't wealthy, he kept records. She rested a hand on the notebook. When he became ill, I helped him. You copied these. Every sale, every bloodline, every debt tied to breeding contracts. Harper frowned. Why would that matter here? Because wealthy ranchers and eastern investors traded breeding stock across half the country. She opened several pages. My father believed someone was changing records. Animals disappeared on paper while debts remained. Good ranchers lost everything because contracts no longer matched the ledgers. Elias leaned closer. And these are copies? Yes. Why? My father stopped trusting the originals. A heavy silence followed. He died before proving anything. And Nathan? Elias asked. He was the owner's son. She swallowed. He wasn't interested in horses. What was he interested in? Money. Elias's eyes drifted toward the county ledgers stacked against the wall. And now someone is searching cattle records here. Clara nodded. If the same fraud spread west, then your notebook might expose it, Elias finished. For the first time, she saw concern break through his calm expression. Not fear for the case, fear for her. You should leave town, Harper blurted. Nathan's arrival had shaken everyone. If someone wants those records, they'll come for them. Clara closed the notebook. I've spent 6 years running. No one answered. She looked toward the window where snow drifted across the empty street. I won't spend a 7th. That night the wind became a blizzard. Snow hammered against the boarding house until the windows rattled. Unable to sleep, Clara heard a faint sound below. Not the wind. Footsteps. She slipped from bed, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and eased open the attic door. The hallway was dark. Another sound. The back entrance. Someone was inside. She quietly lifted the iron poker resting beside the upstairs stove and descended one careful step at a time. The kitchen door stood slightly open. Cold air poured across the floor. A shadow moved. Clara tightened her grip. Who's there? The figure bolted. She ran after him into the swirling snow. The man stumbled toward the stable behind the boarding house, clutching something beneath his coat. Stop! He glanced back only once, long enough for moonlight to catch the sheriff's evidence box in his hands. He had stolen the poisoned seeds. Before Clara could close the distance, another rider emerged from the storm. Elias. Without hesitation, he urged his horse between Clara and the fleeing thief. The stranger abandoned the box and disappeared into the white darkness on foot, vanishing among the trees before either of them could follow. Elias dismounted immediately. "What were you thinking?" he demanded, his voice sharper than she had ever heard. He was taking evidence. He could have been armed. So could anyone. Snow clung to her hair and lashes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elias picked up the dropped evidence box and looked at her with weary honesty. "I can replace evidence." She frowned. "I can't replace you." The words hung in the frozen air. Neither of them seemed prepared for them. Back inside the boarding house, Mrs. Hadley fussed over hot coffee while Elias examined the damaged lock. Nothing else had been taken, only the evidence. Only what connected the poison to something larger. Clara looked toward the window. "They're frightened." "They?" "The people behind this." Elias nodded slowly. "They searched the records. They came for the seeds. And now they know you still have your notebook." He looked directly at her. "I won't ask you to stay." She blinked. "If leaving keeps you alive, I'll put you on tomorrow's stage myself." She searched his face. "You'd do that?" "Yes." "Even if it means losing the only witness who understands this?" "I'd rather lose the case than attend your funeral." For several heartbeats, only the crackling stove spoke. Then there came another knock. Everyone froze. Elias opened the door with one hand resting near his revolver. A soaked railroad courier stood outside, holding a sealed envelope. "Telegram packet from Cheyenne," he said. "Urgent." Elias broke the seal. Inside was a certified copy of a disputed will, one that named a long-forgotten beneficiary whose identity could determine ownership of thousands of acres, tied to the very breeding contracts under investigation. At the bottom of the page was a name neither Elias nor the others expected to read. Clara Bell. Everything Nathan Ashcombe had done suddenly made terrible sense. She had never been merely a witness. She had always been the one person standing between a powerful fraud and the fortune built upon it. And now the entire county would learn who she really was.